Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon to all that is tuned in right now. Oswald Crookshank here at a new time, seeing that I had some traveling to do this morning. We are back for another episode of Tackling Turnover with Teamwork. Host being your boy, Oswald Crookshank here. So, before I get started, let me just make sure the sound is working on all the major platforms. First and foremost, let me check LinkedIn. What's up, LinkedIn? What's up? What's up? All right, LinkedIn works. LinkedIn works. Let's go check Facebook. So, those if it's the first time tuning in here, go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. What I call tackling turnover with teamwork, where we discuss things that are going to be incredibly beneficial. All right, Facebook, we're good. Facebook, we're good. Let me check YouTube to make sure we're good there too. From a new location today, I'll be at this location for the next 3 days. So we'll get used to it. You're gonna see some old school, vintage Oswald Crookshank. All right, let me check YouTube real quick to make sure I'm good. All right, checking YouTube. Check. YouTube, what's up? All right, we're all good. Here we go. Oswald Crookshank here, your one and only Move Swiftly speaker, former Division I college football player, and current 5-time published author and educator, back for another episode, Tackling Turnover with Teamwork. Today, we are going, as we sit here, sitting a week from early signing day in the college football period, there's been massive, when I say massive changes to the world of college football recruiting. In fact, I'm recording this, by the way, in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I grew up, at the house I grew up in, and I'm looking at my book. It's still here, and it's pretty cool and pretty rewarding stuff to see your book sitting at the home in which you built it. But this was my first job out of, let me see if you guys can see it. First job out of college was as a college scout, right? And that was about 10 years ago now, a little over 10 years ago now. And the world of college football recruiting has changed quite a bit. So today we're going to be discussing pretty much the biggest change has been the 7-on-7, the non-padded football practices, the scrimmages, and basically the football that goes on without pads throughout the off season. A lot of those have emerged and stuff like that. So before I get into, what we're going to be talking about today, again, is the pros and cons of what has happened because of that. And before I get into that today, there's still a couple announcements that I have to make. Make a couple announcements here. We're going to get into today's Wintrapreneur tip, and then I'm going to run you down all of the pros and cons, because there are just as many, in my opinion, there are just as many pros and cons towards the 7-on-7 era. All right, that's what a lot of people call it. It's like the 7-on-7 era of college football. There are a lot of positives and there are obviously a lot of negatives, but it really is going to be all about how you manage and how you look at each moment. All right, so we'll be diving deeper into that in today's show. For anything though, however, let's get through some announcements. First things first, if you are in the West Palm Beach area, if you live in West Palm Beach and you are interested in free boxing lessons, you heard me correctly. Free boxing lessons. I will be doing those every 2 weeks. We started this past weekend. Next one will be December 7th. Be sure you register as soon as possible. Let me know if you're interested in coming out. It's a great opportunity for you to develop a very, very important skill and get in shape and grow in your faith, grow in your ability to really understand the importance of having a walk of faith. Again, I'm a group leader at the church in which has put me in the church that put me in charge of this. I'm a group leader at Life Church. So, this was the thing I wanted to do when I joined, and we're full head moving forward with it. Second thing, business owners tuning in. If you have not yet, make sure you go to freeguide.makeyourmove.com. That's freeguide.makeyourmove.com. Put in your information and you will get a free guide on the 10 best ways to be implementing and using innovative teamwork to reduce the turnover in your business right now. All right. Very, very important stuff. You do not want to be one of these business owners that looks up 5-10 years down the line and realizes that you have a revolving door of employees and a revolving door of staff members, and you ultimately have to go back, pretty much have to go under. Your business has to go under because you can't keep people around and the word starts to spread and all that stuff. Again, I've seen a lot of situations like that. That's freeguide.makeitmove.com. Next thing, Patreon link. Your boy's on Patreon now. Patreon.com, man. Patreon.com. Make sure you go to patreon.com/as144. Become a member of the Patreon link. Will start to be producing exclusive content just for the members. Also included in that will be a complimentary Move Swiftly workshop, guaranteed or geared toward. I don't want to say guaranteed, but it's definitely geared toward. It's going to be, because it's the free one, it's going to be geared toward making it so your business or your organization is moving like a cohesive team. The guarantee is when you get to the postseason tier of the membership, where I'm going to start, or I guarantee that the situations are going to work, and you're going to have a staff that is very hungry, very motivated, and a very motivated group of employees. All right. In so many words. All right. So, all right, let's get into today's topic. Today I start, it's kind of ironic that I'm starting today with this wintrepreneur tip. So if you have not heard the term wintrepreneur, let me break it down for you really, really quick. All right. It's basically the term, you heard of the term entrepreneur. It's taking what an entrepreneur has. An entrepreneur has a vision. An entrepreneur has a goal. An entrepreneur has measurables, things that they want to hit, a certain place that they want to be 10, 15 years down the line. It's taking the mindset of an entrepreneur, and it's aligning that vision, that mission. It's aligning that goal with whatever job that person may be having. So you've been blessed enough to be in a situation where you have a vision for what you want your business to be, and you work in a job that aligns with that business. Normally, before As One Crookshank came on this scene, it was called an intrapreneur, but As One has turned it in, and now I'm calling it a wintrepreneur. All right, because again, I'm the guy that's always adding his own flavor to things and creating new ways of looking at this and looking at that. That's what we do over here in the thought leadership world. If you're a thought leadership worth anything, that's actually what your job is to do, is to make sure you're giving folks a perspective, giving folks a new way of looking at things. So a wintrepreneur is basically taking the idea, the concept of an entrepreneur, and someone that has a job that is working that job, and that job is in alignment. There are parallels running with your entrepreneurial vision and the job you're working. All right. So as far as what, and I got too into defining it, but as far as Wednesdays are concerned, every single Wednesday for the past 3 or 4 months at this point now, I come on here and I give you guys a wintrepreneur tip if you are in that situation. So, again, you can go back, you can go check my history every single Wednesday from, I'd say, somewhere around the summer, if I'm not mistaken. I've come on here and I've spoken to you about a wintrepreneur tip, and they've been different ones every single time because I have so much experience as a wintrepreneur. All right. So as far as today's tip, we're going to go to my hometown team. All right, diehard fan of, and I'm going to work on not getting too long-winded when I talk about this. Just know the next live stream, the next episode of Tackling Turnover with Teamwork, I'll be dissecting this idea of a loyal fan, the loyal fan that I am. I'll be dissecting that a little deeper a little later on this week. So stay tuned for that. But I'm just going to give you a taste today because this information actually came across my feed. It came across might have been a YouTube feed. It probably was a YouTube feed that this came across. I came across this on YouTube just yesterday, and it really caught my attention because I grew up an absolute diehard Washington Commander, well, they're currently called the Washington Commanders, formerly known as the Washington Redskins fan, right? I grew up just absolutely obsessed with the team. As I'm here home now, my childhood bedroom, I'm looking at all the pictures. You'll see a bunch of them wear Redskins gear and all that kind of stuff, right? And when this news came across, it says the Commanders agreed to uncancel the Redskins logo. I realized, I didn't even know that the logo was canceled to begin with. I didn't know that the logo was canceled to begin with. And it got me thinking about all of the mixed feelings that I had about them changing the name. Again, me, myself, understanding the side or the point of view in which folks said, oh, the name is so offensive, the name is so offensive, the name is so offensive. But then there was a great deal of people who have a Native American background that were upset at the fact that they changed the name. So there was a lot of mixed feelings. And because I was in Florida, I had already moved to Florida at that point, I didn't pay that much attention to the story because I was at a point as a fan where I was like, look, I don't care what you call yourself. Just start winning some damn games, right? But as the news is coming out and as we have now elected new leadership and this whole woke agenda, the whole woke culture and the cancel culture and all that stuff, it started a lot of people who subscribe to that woke and cancel culture and all that bullshit. A lot of that stuff a lot of us are moving on from that. All right. And if you are that person, I'll just tell you now, you're not going to really like the work I do. You're not going to really like my world because that woke and that cancel culture and all that stuff, that goes against everything it goes against everything we're about over here in the Move Swiftly world, where we're constantly looking to work with people and we're constantly looking to build teams versus the folks that hear something, okay, it makes me uncomfortable, so I'm just going to block it and I'm going to cancel it. Or this whole woke culture where you just start thinking you're better than people and stuff like that. So what I did is I did a little more research on this specific subject, and I had realized that there were a ton of Native Americans that were offended at the fact that they changed the name. So I pulled up this clip for you. It's about an organization that was very disappointed at the fact that they changed the name, and it's a Native American run organization, and they actually have a petition. They have a petition that has a ton of signatures, and they're doing the news report and all that. And the fact that they uncanceled the logo, again, it's actually a big deal. They quote unquote uncanceled the logo, means there's some merit to the Native Americans out there that were very offended at the fact that they changed the name and they want the Redskins name back. So I'll play these two clips for you, and then we'll dive into it, and then we'll get into the topic of today's show. So enjoy.
A Native American group wants the Washington Commanders to change their name back to the Redskins. The NFL team ditched that name back in 2020 after years of criticism. Group is saying, quote, "We are formally requesting the team revitalize its relationship with the American Indian community and rightfully change their name back to the Redskins. You simply cannot erase history and target the Native American community by eradicating the name Redskins." Billy Diekman is an advisor for the Native American Guardians Association. He's also a U.S. Marine and a Kiowa tribe member, and Billy joins me now. Billy, why are you fighting to bring it back?
There's a couple reasons. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Segon Pentali from the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, also known as Billy Diekman, which is my adopted name. The deep, rich history behind the Redskins name, the myth that it means bloody scalps or something derogatory is what we're trying to dispel. It's a status symbol for elite warriors. Yeah. Only the elite warriors were allowed to participate in the blood root ceremony to go into battle. It even says in our fight song, "Braves on the warpath." The imagery that you see is that of Chief Toucan's white calf. That's a real person. There's a lot of times they say, you need to get rid of your mascot. We don't have a mascot. That's a real person. That was gifted to the Redskins in the NFL by the Blackfoot tribe as a forever gift. That's one of the greatest warriors of all time. So add to that 100 years worth of history. Our fight is to reinstate this because it was taken away without consulting us, without any of our approval. And now that we're trying to get it back, we've launched a petition that has just been overwhelming. It's become
Okay, so before I let the second clip play, I want to explain something. I want to kind of break down initially what he said, because you're listening to someone who grew up a diehard Washington Redskins fan. And as I sit here today, I'm about a month, or about a little over a month from my 36th birthday. I find myself being more interested in what's going on with my college teams. All right. If you're a regular consumer of my work, you know I talk a lot about Michigan football because I'm a diehard fan. And, I'm more so looking, or whether it's the more so bothered with Michigan losses these days than I am with Commanders losses these days. And what struck me about that is the fact that I didn't even know that that was actually a real person. It wasn't just some random Indian. It was actually somebody that fought and was, there was approved to go into war, go into battle and stuff like that. And this book I'm reading, shout out to Robert White. He was also a guest on my show, on my podcast. It's title of his episode, I believe, is Extraordinary Life. But I was reading his book on the flight over here, and he was talking about the importance of staying curious. He's talking about the importance of when you do want to be what I refer to as a wintrepreneur, it's constantly going to be about knowing that you're going to be got to be always curious, got to be constantly asking questions, and be willing to humble yourself enough to take in new information. All right, so let me let this last clip play for you, and then we'll dive in. We'll kind of end the wintrepreneur segment of this and get into what today's topic is all about.
Tidal wave.
Petition to change the name back has nearly 100,000 signatures. You mentioned the word warrior. You are a Marine veteran yourself, Desert Storm and Somalia. Thank you for your service. Obviously, that notion of a warrior connotes a positive thought to you. But we've been told for decades that every single Native American is offended by the name Indians, warriors, Redskins. What percentage of the people, the Native Americans that you know, are offended by the name Redskins?
Several polls have been done, independent polls. They all came back with the exact same results. 90% of natives are in approval and see it as a proud symbol. And the ones that know who Chief Two Guns White Calf is, it's even higher in those areas. So after the two polls that were done in 2015, they tried to redo it one more time by offering people 40 words. And what was their response? Overwhelmingly, again, pride came back, proud came back, strength came back.
Billy, do you view this as yet another attempt by liberal white America to tell a minority group like Native Americans how to think about their race, how to think about their heritage?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what we're trying to undo. There's been decades of this. In this day and age, there's still a Christopher Columbus Day in 2023. We're not taken serious. Our voice has not been heard. And that's what NAGA is designed for, to fight that and to correct some of that that's been eradicated. NAGA being the Native Americans Guardians Association.
It is a fascinating plight that you're taking up. I am curious to follow it and see where it goes with football season upon us. A lot of attention going to be on the Redskins/Commanders.
All right. So first things first, NAGA, Native American Guardian Association. All right. That's the name of it. But the next thing I want to make sure we emphasize is the fact that 90%, it's a large percent of people that came back when they did their service and they did their homework, 90% of the Native American groups came back. It said that the name meant something positive, as strong, as something that they were proud to be around. However, the power of the media and who he mentioned was the white liberals who decided that they were going to put it out there and, kind of speak for a minority group without actually consulting them, and then put it out there. And then all of a sudden they got what they wanted, and the name eventually got changed. You have to be careful out there. All right, guys, when you're building your business, when you are out there and you have your entrepreneurial vision, you want to do this, you want to do that. And then you run into like a conglomerate, a huge organization, like a big company. Like I was telling you guys this past Monday, is almost like when an Under Armour ran into a Nike. You know, Under Armour, the small company, Nike, the big company. When you run into these massive organizations, they can spin things the way they want. They have the power of the media to spin certain things the way they want. And what we have to take away from that as a way of just wrapping today's Entrepreneur Tip up, is we have to make sure our vision is airtight. We know our numbers. You see, the guy knew his percentages. He knew his numbers. He himself fought in the Marines. He has experience going into battle, and ultimately being willing to go out and step out and go against the natural order of things, but doing it in a professional way and do it in a respectable way. All right. So today's Entrepreneur Tip, again, the fact that the Redskins name, or the Redskins logo, is officially uncanceled. You see the date. This came on the Daily Wire just 2 days ago, and I saw it, and I'm like, man, this is something that I want to definitely report on, seeing that I am a diehard fan of the team. All right, so as far as what we're going to discuss today, 7-on-7. Oh yes, 7-on-7 football. 7-on-7 has absolutely changed the way recruiting works. All right. So there's quite a few things to get into. There's quite a few pros and there's quite a few cons when it comes to 7-on-7 football. Just so we're clear, let me give you a full definition on what 7-on-7 football is. 7-on-7 football is basically two-hand touch football. All right. You have your quarterback, you have your skilled players, your quarterback and your wide receivers and your running backs. And they're basically going over routes, passing game, they're working their pass game. And you have your defensive back seven, your linebackers and your DBs, your corners and your safeties. And they're going against an offense. And that's 7-on-7, 3 backers, 4 DBs. You have 1 quarterback, and then you have about 6 receivers, whether it's basically 6 receivers, a tight end and a running back, or 4 receivers, a tight end, running back, and they're going through their pass game stuff. All right, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. All right, when I played in high school, it was something that we did, and I remember for my first ever 7-on-7 tournament, it was one of those things where Coach Willett had told us before we actually went to this tournament. I cannot remember what high school we did have it at, but he told us beforehand that it was just something that we can do in the summer and the off season. But by the time we got there in the morning, goes, look, by the time we get to noon, and by the time it was lunch, you're ready to just get out of there, because you realize, look, football is played in the trenches. The real winners of every game of football, you're going to notice that it's because they won up front on the line, and the offensive and defensive line is going to be the reason that a game is either won or lost. So 7-on-7 removes, there's no offensive or defensive line, and it's just guys running around, going through routes and things of that nature, which, again, I'm not going to sit here and say it's all a negative thing. This is why today is it's the pros and the cons of 7. In fact, let me put a banner up. Hold on one second, so that way you guys know what I'm talking about. Pros and cons of 7-on-7 football. Banner. All right. So, So, again, seeing that we're here a week from signing day, where they added an early signing day period, I'm going to start off with a quick story as I talk about this, because when I got to college, it was my last year as a player. Actually, I played at Stony Brook University. Again, I have the book right here, Transferring D1, which you can get on makeyourmove.com, by the way. It's makeymove.com. But I remember that last year, it was during that, it was the off season of that picture that you just saw. So this was the spring. And then this summer, I remember I stayed during that summer, and we did a lot of the 7-on-7 stuff in-house at Stony Brook football, right? So I remember I was talking to I think the name DJ. Yeah, DJ. DJ was a receiver at the time. And I remember I was having a conversation with him because I was the fullback, and, we had a couple packages for 7-on-7 to, during 7-on-7 for the fullback, very few because we were primarily blockers and all that. But he, as the slot receiver, obviously had to do a lot of different things. He had to know a lot of different routes and know where he needed to be and, be able to read defenses and all that kind of stuff, right? So I remember we were having a conversation during one of those 7-on-7 scrimmages, or one of those practices that we would have as players only because the coaches weren't actually allowed to be there. And I remember him making the point that, look, the minute that those 5 offensive linemen are down and that those 4 defensive linemen are down, it completely changes the way you compete and the way you're able to actually organize and read defenses. All right. So understanding that as 7-on-7 has grown, it's very important that you don't base, if you're just talking about, again, if I'm speaking directly to the coaches here, it's important that you don't base so much of what your season is going to look like around what you're looking like during 7-on-7. Don't get me wrong. It's important that you see who can play with this one, who can run with this one, who knows their calls, who knows who's been in their playbook, who knows exactly where they need to be, what depth they need to be, and all that kind of stuff. You can measure certain things, but don't put too much into it because you don't know what kind of a grown men, right, that you have up front. And that's where the game is really won. All right. So first of all, let's talk about the pros. All right. I have a couple pros here. First thing that 7-on-7 can do, and I've kind of already mentioned the conditioning aspect of it, but it is very important that you understand that the good things about 7-on-7 football and having, guys running around and, running routes and going through certain things and competing with some other schools and stuff like that, that's a great thing because of the conditioning. All right. First and foremost is the conditioning. Your guys are getting in shape. You're knowing who you can trust, who can catch, who can run with people, whether we're looking at it from the offensive perspective or the defensive perspective. The offensive guys, you can see what receivers are running routes regularly, who can come back in after they just, somebody runs a post, can they come right back and run a slant, and then can they go and do an out route? Can they do an in route? Can they keep going play after play without taking any rest off? That's important to see in the offseason because you're going to see who's in condition and who's ready to go. Next thing that's going to be great is you're going to get the chemistry, at least as we're talking about offense now. You're going to have the chemistry within your quarterback and your receivers, which is even more important to know, hey, my quarterback knows where I need to be, knows where the back shoulder is, he knows where exactly I like it on this play and on that play. All that stuff is great when it comes to building chemistry in-house. All right. Very, very important thing. Also, if you're looking at it from the defensive standpoint, you're able to see, and this is why I think it's very important that if you're a D coordinator and you're talking about 7-on-7, it's very important that you make man-to-man your bread and butter. Make it so you can see what corners can run with people in man-to-man. Make it so you're seeing what your safeties are all about. Make it so you know your guys, so to speak. Your guys, know your bread and butter when it comes to the play calls that you're going to be calling defensively. All right. In fact, I'll close out the pros just with this concept. When I coached high school for 2 seasons, it was at a school named Blake High School, which is right here in Silver Spring, Maryland. And we were, we had just gotten a new coach. Shout out to Deshaun Anderson if you're listening, right? So we had just got a brand new coach. He was in his first year, and I was with him for his first 2 seasons as a head coach. And I remember going into the second year, we had a 7-on-7 with the current, I almost hate actually having to say this, but the current the current CAC champs, the DeMatha Stags. I'm a graduate, played a good council, so I don't really like having to say that, but I got to give them the credit, got to give them their props. The current CAC champs, the DeMatha Stags. So anyway, we had, and in fact, that year was I'm recording this in 2024, so 2016 is when I coached high school. that was the last year that the Mountaineers won the WCAC championship. And, we had actually scrimmaged them that year in 7-on-7 when I was coaching at Blake. And I remember it was a lot of positive things going into that because we were clearly outmatched. They had the Chase Youngs of the world. They had, again, top-notch, top-level blue-chip recruits. And we were a team that basically had a losing culture. We had just gone 0-10 the year before, right? So we go up against them in a scrimmage at the University of Maryland right there at Capital One Field. And I remember Deshaun Anderson, who was the head coach. Remember when we went up against him, he decided, you saw it in his face. He made the clear decision that he was going to go man to man the whole time, man to man. I know we're overmatched, but at the end of the day, we wanted to see who can run with people and who was going to man up with these, obviously top shelf recruits. And that was a very important thing. I thought that was actually one of the better things that he did, during my time there, is the fact that, hey, let's see who's really willing to go out and compete. Next thing, if you're looking at it from the DeMatha standpoint, I remember Chase Young, who now plays for the New Orleans Saints as a defensive end. And he was a runner-up for the Heisman, one of the few defensive ends that was actually a runner-up for the Heisman Trophy when he played at Ohio State. I remember he was actually playing receiver. He was playing receiver. Again, you get a D end who probably didn't play much offense, and I watched DeMatha throughout that entire fall. He played no offense at all. Chase Young, again, all-star, first team All-American, was commit to Ohio State and all that kind of stuff. And he played no offense at all. I don't think I remember seeing him once on offense. He was a DN, strictly a DN, easily the best defensive end in the country at that point. And he was playing receiver during a 7-on-7 game. That is the important stuff. That's the pros. Those are the good things that come about when it comes to 7-on-7. Number one, it's the cohesiveness and the ability for teammates to start to gel together, to start to figure out who they can work with, and the conditioning element to it. The fact that guys can be in condition, get in shape, and run around on a hot, sunny day and all that, as long as we're staying hydrated. All that stuff is good. Now, the pros and the cons, you can look at the exposure, like what starts to happen. What starts to happen when it comes to college football, and we start to see these things, can be looked at as a pro and a con depending on the situation, okay? Because most of the cons that are going to be coming up today are centered around recruiting. They're centered around recruiting and how these 7-on-7 organizations start to come together. Because what starts happening now is you start to see third-party influences, start to see, whoever it is coming in that's putting on whatever tournament and whatever it costs to get this team in, and they're taking this money and they're promising this kid, hey, this coach is going to be here. And now you start to see where the cons are going to be coming in, because the minute college football coaches got involved in it and it became like a recruiting thing, now it starts to be, okay, who's got this one, who knows this one, who knows that one. So as I get into the cons, it's about a 45-minute video on YouTube called College Football Blueprint for Change. This happened back when Urban Meyer still had still had no gray hairs, right? This was a while ago. This was back when Nick Saban was in his prime, Bob Stoops was in his prime. And I remember I've watched that video at least 10 to 15. Again, it's a 45-minute video on YouTube called College Football Blueprint for Change. This was actually before the playoffs even started, because there was a lot of things going on in college football that thing going on in college football that needed to be changed, whether it was the players getting paid, whether it was the playoff system needing to be fixed. There were so many complaints and so many things going on that ESPN did a whole panel with a lot of influential college football members, and they explained the issues that came up with the 7-on-7. So as I get into the cons, let me play you these few clips so you understand that the cons are going to be coming because of individual people and what they're actually doing to the game. Here's the first one.
We have to decide which rules are worth enforcing. What's the most important rule that's worth enforcing? Where would you start in recruiting rules, Kurt?
We have all-star coaches that are basically street agents that are trying to go and talk to all these schools and, hey, what are you going to do for me kind of thing. I think really enforcing third parties and outside influences, priority number one currently for college football. Ask these guys.
I absolutely agree, and I think to clarify the 7-on-7 deal is, if the high school coach is doing it,
sure,
and they have their tournaments, that's great. They have great tournaments. But when you have to deal with people outside that are in it for their own probably personal benefit, some kind of way exploiting the young man, that's not a good thing. And that's one of the things that I think we really have to be careful about in football.
I'm totally on board. I love dealing with parents, family, coaches. And to me, everything ought to be done through the high schools, through the high school coaches. And I know, as us as coaches, we have great relationship with high school coaches. And the last thing I want to do is not be talking to them about their athlete.
Okay, you see my point? When it comes to 7-on-7, the issue is not the actual going and competing for, whatever trophy the 7-on-7 is. The issue is who's bringing the kid or who's actually putting on the tournament. All right. Like Nick Saban just explained to you guys, it's one thing if the high school coaches are doing it and it has an approval from the high schools to where these coaches, these college coaches, they come in and deal directly with a high school coach and say, hey, I'm looking at this kid. This is what we need. This is where we're green. We may be looking at him to fill this position, this, that, and the third. If that conversation is going on specifically with a college coach and a high school coach, that's great because there's a pipeline that can be respected. Or there's a pipeline that can be specifically followed. And the kid, again, I know you as the parent or you as the quote unquote street agent, the third party, you want to see, whoever it is, your son, in this case, it'll be your son. You want to see them move on and get a scholarship and be at be at that level. But at the same time, you have to understand that there has to be a level of authority that has to be handled at the proper channels. And I'll give you an example, because when I remember when I coached at Blake, one of our best players, it was my first year there, one of our best players, his name was Julian. I mean, when I say it was Ty who ended up at Temple, but Julian was easily the second best player on the team. And he ended up playing at Salisbury. I remember he had to sit out that entire offseason because we did a spring 7-on-7 and he played that, ran around the entire day, in the hot sun, ran around the entire day. And the next day, his dad took him to Temple University for a camp and he ended up pulling his groin and it bothered him throughout the entire offseason. There's tons of stories like that where, again, whether it's the parent that may not be thinking about, or may not trust the high school coach to get their kid in a certain school and all that, but you start making bad decisions and you thinking that the 7-on-7 is going to be all about exposure. When again, like I mentioned before, it's not about exposure so much as it's about conditioning and working with your team. So I have 2 more clips to play for you. And then we'll dive into a few more of the cons, and then I'll give you the solution of one of the things that we need to be doing to solve this particular problem. So
we had to do away with the combines. That really bothered me because I thought the combines run by some of the shoe companies were some of the greatest. They get 600 of the best athletes in one place, and you could go watch them, and it solved a lot of issues for recruiting. But we had to do away with it because the same thing, the street agents and people who are bringing them there or influencing those kids were negative.
So I assume for the coaches here, it was too difficult and you were at a competitive disadvantage if you tried to limit yourself simply to the high school coaches and their programs that kept you away from other players. You couldn't create your own rule, just say, I'm not dealing with this 7-on-7. If it's an all-star, I'm only dealing with the high schools. You couldn't do that, right?
Well, but if the guy if the third party has influence over the player, then you won't have an opportunity to recruit the player. And where a lot of the extra benefits sort of get circumvented toward is that third-party person. In most cases, all right, where there's some extra benefit case, it's the third-party person who is really trying to promote
shopping
it
the kid.
And shopping the kid. So that's a really bad thing. I would rather not deal with those kind of folks.
This is part of who we are as a society.
Right.
We create the superstar and the superstar mentality at an earlier and earlier age, and I think some of those kids are drawn to people like that because they think that's what they're supposed to do.
And you see the point he's making where he's going. It's that third party, and we're on the con tip. It's that third party, and that third party can come in the form of a parent, can come in the form of an uncle, can come in the form of a personal trainer who now is all of a sudden he's a 7-on-7 coach. It can be a former player that has a son, and you're trying to exploit your son and get your son to be on the radar for this, and just doing all sorts of things. Again, I have seen it up and down, whether it's football, basketball, whatever the sport is, there's always going to be that overly pushy parent or that overly pushy dad or that overly pushy third party influence that's living through the kid, that's living in a sense that's trying to exploit the kid and say, yeah, I'm the one that got him this, I'm the one that got him that, and start to live through that kid, which again, it's coming from a place where, okay, it's great that you want to do well or you want to help your son get a quote unquote scholarship and all that. I can respect that. But at the same time, you have to let the process play out. You cannot be that one that is there and is constantly exploiting these kids and exploiting the situation and exploiting these families, because ultimately who suffers in the situation is the parents who really don't know how this stuff works. This is all new to them. And the only thing, like that typical, whether it's a typical mother who really doesn't know a lot about the politics of the game and how the game works and how these coaches get paid and how all the money comes in, they're there, and whatever they have in their pocketbook, whatever they can afford, they're paying whatever for whatever camp, for whatever cleats or whatever uniforms, whatever team. Somebody told me, yeah, I'm gonna be getting recruited by Nick Saban if I play for this team, so I paid him $200 for this and all. Though that all of that is part of the cons. And it has nothing to do with the sad part about it has nothing to do with the actual kids. It has nothing to do with the actual the coaches that actually want to win and the ones that are out there competing. It has everything to do with that person who sees somebody with a dream, with a goal, with an ambition to do something, and they start taking advantage of it. All right. That's the con. That's the con in doing this stuff where you're doing things outside of your actual high school team. All right. So I have one more clip, and I'll close you guys out with what can be done to solve the problem. Because again, the reason we're having this conversation is because we're a week away from early signing day period, which again doesn't make any sense to me as to why they're even doing an early signing day period, seeing that you have the transfer portal now and you have another signing day in February, where the timing of all of this stuff going on, then you're going to have coaching changes going on. I mean, it is a mess. Actual college football, when it comes to the scheduling of these things and the way things are being turned around and the way coaches are maybe considering other jobs and other positions and the way the season is ending. It's the scheduling of all the recruiting stuff. And then you have to pick a playoff team. Now you got 12 teams to put in the playoffs. And now, you got to be focused on that. And then you got bowl games, bowl travel schedules, all sorts of things about to go down in the college football world. I'm going to talk to you about how to solve some of this in a second. Just hear one last clip and then we'll go from there.
With their son or daughter, in this case, their son in football. I don't know what the NCAA can do to stop that.
Every year you got to adapt on a memo to the head football coach, athletic director, president of the university. This is the current issues right now in college football. Here's the issue. Here's the punishment. And use the word suspension, fines. You're not going to deal with those third party. We can't stop third party people. You can control college football. Every year we sign a sheet of paper. A college football coach that says, I do not know of any violations. Now you sign that, and you have a failure, that's 1 year suspension. Why sign that unless it's clear what the punishment is for that?
If college football doesn't get their hands around the 7-on-7, it pains me to say this, and Jay knows it. That's what we have in college basketball right now. The scholastic influence in college basketball has been minimized so much, it's frightening. You're not getting a top college basketball player to go to your institution unless you deal with, quote, what we refer to as the street agent. College basketball's problem is immense. If football doesn't get their hands around it, it's going to be just like it.
Let's bring up this before we have to move on. The name Willie Lyles is it's synonymous.
All right, so listen, that video is made like 10 to 15 years ago, before the college football players, the majority had 3 segments. And again, I strongly recommend you go watch it for yourself, because they had 3 segments. They talked about what we just talked about, the 7-on-7 and third party influence. Then there was a segment about should players get paid. And then there was a segment about should college football go to a playoff system and remove the BCS system. So I recommend you go watch the entire thing yourself. All right. What the last point that he made about, and the reason I played that the last one, because I come from a state that's primarily known in the basketball world. We're a basketball hotbed. Maryland is a basketball hotbed. And I currently live in Florida, which is a football hotbed. And I have a unique perspective because I can see how both sides work. All right. I watched how basketball became all about what he just said as the street agent. And if you weren't dealing with some street agent, if you were Coach Calipari or Coach K, Roy Williams, John Thompson, Bill Self, you name whatever basketball coach you want to name. If you were that coach coming to Maryland looking to recruit some kids, and you weren't dealing with the street agent, the guy that third party influence that we're referring to, that you just weren't going to have a shot at them, because the game of basketball, you saw the way the game was changing. As the game, you can take one player can just take over a game. Right? Not like football. One player can literally go get a steal. He can be that much headed. We saw it with LeBron James, and it completely changed what the whole college basketball thing did. All right, because we saw an absolute phenom in LeBron. When it comes to football, you cannot do it like that. You cannot, like it. The sport does not function if you do not have certain pieces together, meaning you can't just bring in some high price, some great quarterback and automatically expect to win a national championship, unless that quarterback is walking into a situation where that offensive line is together. They know what they're doing. They know their assignments. They know how to protect. If you don't have a solid run game, if you don't have solid receivers, that quarterback, I don't care how talented he is, he will not succeed unless he has the pieces around it. Which is why, again, when we're talking about college football recruiting and we're talking about the pros and the cons, and in my opinion, given the amount of third-party influences, given the amount of money that's involved in it, given the amount of things that go on, and how much money that these programs make, and the facilities that go on, these huge fan bases that college football brings, in my opinion, the cons easily outweigh the pros if we're talking about 7-on-7 football, because there's so much of the third party influence. There's so much money involved. And you, as the person who is rooting for a particular player, again, you have, like me, myself, I have a nephew that's coming up. He's going to be in high school in 2 years now. I'm obviously going to be very biased towards my nephew, and I want my nephew to find a school, find the right situation. I want to be the best athlete that the world has ever seen. Obviously, I'm his uncle, and I'm not telling you as an uncle that may be listening, or as a father that may be listening, or someone that's rooting for a kid. Even when I coach high school, I'm obviously looking at a Ty Mason who I coached, or a Max Tempchin who I coached, the guys that I coached, and I say you obviously want them to do well because you know them personally. All right, so that's fair. But the main thing, the main point that you have to take away from this is human behavior. And he goes on to actually say, I couldn't play the last part of the video. Again, go watch the whole thing yourself. But then what Nick Saban said in that video is he said that all of this that's going on, all the shady stuff that goes on in the world of college football recruiting, it really just boils down to human behavior, just moral, having the ethics, having the empathy, having the moral consciousness to do things the right way. If you have that person, and this is where you need to be just cognizant of that, as if you're listening to this and you're the business owner that may be interested in working with some of these teams, and working with high school athletics, you see high school athletics as a bridge towards helping your business. And the reason I talk so much about whether it's college athletics and high school athletics is because one of the promises that I actually make to business owners, one of the guarantees I give them, is that your staff is now going to be moving as cohesively as a championship football team moves, where everybody's hungry, everybody's working hard, everybody's competing, everybody's getting better. That's the feeling that you're going to have in your organization after you have done a Move Swiftly workshop with me, and you've allowed me to really, really dissect the problems that are going on with your team. That's why it's important for you as business owners to understand you can be the moral business owner that does things the right way, that creates legitimate opportunities, and you make sure you are removing the unethical folks from these events and removing the unethical folks from these hungry student athletes that are coming up. That, again, only 1% of them are going to make it to the NFL. Only 1% of them are going to be professional at this. You have to make sure you're opening up a door, cracking a window, creating opportunities so the ethical ones are able to be around these kids, raise them up the right way, have them see things in a certain way, and they're able to now take advantage of the opportunity that they have to play sports. Because I've said it once and 1,000 times, all right? Playing sports, being involved with athletics is not a right. It's a privilege. There's a lot of things that need to go the right way in order for you to compete. All right. It's a privilege. It's a privilege. It's not a right. All right. A lot of people take that for granted at times. All right. So that's pretty much my take on that. The main website to check out to dive deeper into all my work, if you're first time tuning in, it's makeyourmove.com. It's MAKEYAMOVE.com. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, coming back at you this Friday. I have another great topic. It's what I do. It's what I do. Again, if you have not yet, make sure you tap into the Patreon link, patreon.com/as144, and also check out the makeyourmove.com, make your move, MAKEYAMOVE.com, one-stop shop for your teamwork and your self-development needs. As one Crookshank checking out. You guys continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon. Checking out. You guys continue to move swiftly. We will talk